Trust is a charity. It started in 1995, and there were two areas that we chose to focus on early on, 96, 97. How many of you remember the TOPS bags? Yes, a lot of hands go up. That was us. The early and first programs we did were Top Play and Top Sport. And you probably remember that BT got involved and provided funding so that not only did we give you, hopefully, a big bag of very useful child-friendly equipment and a set of resources, but we were able to provide training for primary teachers all over the country. And with the support of lottery funding, we were able to put a bag of equipment, a set of resources and training into all 18,000 primary schools across England, which was fantastic. The other area that we were very focused on and very committed to was the whole business of sport for young people with special needs. So from the outset, we were really determined that inclusion was a big part of what we were about. And we also were really fortunate that we got some funding from what was then the Camelot Foundation to develop a program called Top Sports Ability, which was designed very specifically to go into schools, special needs schools, to support physical education and sport in those schools. So our passion for this area of primary physical education and sport has been there since 1995. When we developed the school sport partnerships, we made really clear that we wanted primary link teachers to be released off timetable to get training for physical education. So for us, this is another building block, another opportunity to continue that message. But there's two messages I want to give you really, and I want to ask you a question that it's a difficult one, but I'd be grateful if you could give me an honest answer. If I gave you £9,000, but I didn't ring fence it, I did not ring fence it, how many of you would spend it on PE and sport? Not one flipper has gone up. Oh, one, fantastic. Two, that's about the average across the country. And that is because you're facing many other pressures. I absolutely understand the pressures you feel you're under in terms of SATS results, in terms of the challenges you've got around, some of you around behaviour, inclusion, parental engagement, achieving results, Ofsted inspection. I appreciate that. And instead of you starting from a place of thinking about, well, how do I spend £9,000 on PE and sport? I'd like you to start from a place where you draw up in front of your own mind your whole school plan, the plan you've got, what's in your mind about what you're trying to do for your young people in your school. What are your biggest issues? And rather than just think of spending this money over here as a sort of bump on the side of the mainstream of what you're doing, drag that money across and think of it as a tool to achieve those outcomes. So if one of your outcomes, one of your issues might be behaviour, how do we use PE and sport to affect some behaviour change? If you're thinking about attendance, a group of youngsters that are struggling with literacy, a group of youngsters struggling with numeracy, parental engagement in the school. Whatever those issues are, I hope that as I talk tonight and you think about how you want to spend this money, you keep going back to that whole school plan. And you keep thinking about this as a tool to help you achieve your wider educational objectives. If in 2 years' time you've spent this money, and what you say to me is, we're doing more PE and sport, I'll say, good. If you say, we are doing more PE and sport, but I've really been able to use it to increase the opportunities for my young people, to improve their chances, to improve education, I'll say that's great. So that's where I want you to start from, if I may ask you to do that. And you're probably sitting there saying, well, do you have any evidence for what you're saying to me? Well, we have two lots of evidence that is worth rehearsing with you, I think. In 1997, we were asked by the then Conservative government under John Major to actually look after what were called specialist sports colleges. They were secondary schools that were choosing a specialism to help them improve whole school. So some were doing technology, some were doing computing, some were doing languages, and we were given 11 schools that were going to use sport to drive whole school improvement. over the years from 1997 through to 2009, we had over 500 of the 3,000 secondary schools in this country choose sport as their specialism. And down to very creative teachers and great leadership by head teachers, we saw whole school improvement happening as a result of the way they applied PE and sport. So whilst I want you to think about more PE and sport, I want you to think, how do you use it? So specialist sports colleges were the fastest improving academically for 4 consecutive years. I don't think that was a coincidence, and I don't think it was an accident. I think it was the skill of the teachers and the leaders of those schools using PE and sport to really affect change in other key areas of school. And then just to kind of give you a second bank of evidence, towards the end of the Labour government, the Labour government wanted to pilot primary specialist schools. There was no resource. The Youth Sport Trust, through its benefactor, Sir John Beckworth, found the funding to actually fund 6 specialist primary PE schools. We identified with the Department for Education 6 schools with really challenging circumstances. 6 schools that had poor SATS results, many of which were very challenged with a whole range of issues in school. Without exception, their SATS results went up, and in some cases, they went up dramatically. And there are schools in Nottinghamshire, Carlton School in Nottingham, that was a classic example of demonstrating what could be done, not when you just did more PE in sport, but when you really used it to tackle some of those bigger issues. So do I have evidence to say that PE in sport can affect whole school change? Yes, I do. And I believe both in secondary and primary, with great leadership from very good head teachers and some creative thinking, you can have a real impact on school performance in its widest sense. So that slide is about saying participation is great, but can we really use it to help you achieve your educational outcomes? Okay, now we'll get on to what you came to listen to. Government funding. It's £150 million a year for 2 years. And I think probably what's of interest to you is that it doesn't come from one department. This funding comes from the Department of Health, the Department of Education, and the Department of Culture, Media and Sport through Sport England. And the vast proportion of it comes from health and education. So I think as you start to think about how you want to use this money, perhaps you can think about those key areas of health and education being a real drivers for the way you position sport and physical education. So that 150 million, largely from health and education. And it is going to be statutory, that it's ring-fenced for PE and sport, and you will have to account for the use of it. So I know that you're extremely skillful at using money to do the things that you really need to do, but you will have to account for this £9,000 a year, or roughly £9,000 each per year in public, in putting it on your website. The funding will be allocated £8,000 to every primary school, special school with primary youngsters. The number of primary youngsters will be based on your census that you did in January. That's when they will count the number. It's £8,000 plus another £5 for every youngster over the 15 that you've got in school. So you'll work it out for yourself. If you're a big primary school, it could be as much as £10,000. If you're a very small one, it'll be just a little over £8,000 a year for 2 years. And then, of course, it will be on Ofsted's radar. I know how challenging for some of you Ofsted inspection can be. But I think what you'll find with this is that Ofsted are going to produce some guidance for you. I've had the opportunity to speak to Sir Michael Wilshaw and his team at Ofsted. They are going to produce some guidance. I don't think it'll be restraining guidance. It will give you guidance as to where they feel this money might be best spent. And I think that will lie in the 3 areas I've talked about: physical education, health and sport. So I'm sure that guidance will be helpful in steering you towards what you need to do. And when they come to inspect it, I have been asked by a lot of people, do you think they will have the expertise to inspect it? Without getting myself into very deep water, I think that's a really interesting question, and it's one I've asked Michael Wilshaw, and I think we need to work on that. But it will be on the radar of Ofsted inspectors when they come in, and they will ask questions about what you're doing around this piece of work. So, what are you going to spend the £9,000 on? Well, for me, there's 3 areas. And those three areas, I would argue, are all valid for every primary school. So first of all, there's the curriculum. Physical education is a curriculum subject. It isn't called sport, it's called physical education. And it's called physical education because it should be distinctive from sport. It's not called sport education, it's called physical education. And I'm going to come back to try and define what I mean by that. And I believe physical education as a curriculum subject has the potential for you to deliver all of those things you're trying to accomplish with your youngsters through high quality teaching and learning inside the curriculum. So for me, physical education is the bedrock of everything else you do. And I'm going to come back and try and define what I mean by physical education. If your physical education is great, then obviously you build on that with sport. You complement it and supplement it with coaches and others coming into school to add value to what you're doing, teaching physical education in the curriculum. And of course, there's that other area of health and well-being. Is your school a healthy environment? Are youngsters really active? Do they really understand the whole business of energy in and energy out? And what does that look like? So those would be the 3 areas. And if you're a great school, and I'm sure many of you are, you'll have something going on in all of those 3. You can probably think about something now that you're doing in physical education, in after-school sport, and in health and well-being. So I'm going to just take each of those and try and differentiate them for you and help you think about what you're doing with them and what difference you might want to make. So let's talk about physical education. What do we mean by it? I want you to just come with me for a minute on a little trip, okay? I want you to leave your school and come outside to a PE lesson in the outdoors. So it's probably going to be cold and raining in this country. Come outdoors and have a look at what you see when you're watching physical education. What are you looking at? What are you seeing? Just take yourself there now. I don't know when you last went out to look at physical education. What is it you notice? What is it you see? Okay, now I want you to come back in school with me. Put your collar down because it's warmer in school, hopefully. And go and have a look at the very best teacher you've got in literacy or numeracy. The very best teacher in your school who's doing a great job, great teaching and learning. Do you see anything different? Or is the quality of teaching and learning just as good outdoors as it is inside? Or when you went outdoors, was it noisy, fun, lots of smiles, but was it really good teaching and learning? Or are you seeing high quality teaching and learning in a different environment? Because that's what you should be seeing. You should be seeing high quality teaching and learning in a unique environment, which is where we are learning in a different style. And I know what you're going to tell me, and you're going to tell me that your teachers, who've got very minimal training, many of them, in physical education, some, about 50% of teachers get less than 10 hours in their initial teach training, come to your school and they develop a confidence and a competence in the classroom because it's familiar And no matter what the subject area, there's a familiarity about it. They know how to engage every youngster. They know how to differentiate groups. They know how to put people in groups which are fast-tracking or supporting. They know how to change the pace of the lesson. That's the skills they develop. The moment they go out into PE, all of those things disappear because this is a new and different context. And when you survey primary teachers, they tell you they feel less confident and less competent. And indeed, in the recent Ofsted report, Ofsted said that primary teachers clearly felt they did not have the knowledge to deliver physical education competently. So what we've got to do is help them understand that this is about physical literacy. It's not about their ability to teach cricket or tennis. It's physical literacy. And if I asked you as head teachers to think through how you build up literate youngsters, how you build up numerate youngsters, you would tell me what that looks like. You'd be able to describe that pathway of learning. Well, physical literacy follows a similar pathway. And you would not give a book on Shakespeare to a 5-year-old. You would be building up to the point where they could write short stories, read effectively. Neither should we be giving youngsters full-sided games. We should be building up those physical literate skills. So think of physical education as excellent teaching and learning, physical literacy, a place where they can learn so many things that we're losing. I was going into Leicester to catch the train down to London the other day, and there were 20 youngsters in a bus queue, all waiting, presumably, for the school bus. Like this. All with earphones in, okay? There was nobody fooling about. I almost wish there had been. There was nobody talking, nobody communicating. Many of the skills that we are starting to lose, we can reintroduce through this thing called physical education. Talking, working collaboratively, communicating, leading, understanding one another. You know, I know it's a kind of old-fashioned to talk about teamwork and so on, but physical education provides a very different context within which we can help kids learn. So physical literacy, learning, leadership. And of course, as you get towards the end of Key Stage 2, it's not just about literacy. We're starting to play small-sided games. We're starting to write little stories. We're starting to play activities that 9, 10, 11-year-old begin to transfer us into the sporting context. But it's how we build that matters. And thinking that through with your colleagues, I think, is really important. And in case you think you're all alone, you're not. There are organisations like the Youth Sport Trust and others that have got really good programmes to help you do this work. For example, we've developed a programme called Start to Move. It took 2 years of research looking at world best practice at Key Stage 1, physical education and literacy across the world. We've developed the programme, we've rolled it out into 3,000 primary schools across the country. And it's not a bag, it's not a set of resources, it's an approach. And the approach is really simple. It says to teachers, you're really good at teaching. That is not where we're starting from. You're good at teaching. You know how to do this work in the classroom. Let's take all those great things you do in the classroom and move them out into the playground. Let's just apply what you know. And that has kind of lifted a mystique and a cloud on this. And you can see how excited teachers are when they actually realise this is something they can do, and actually it's a really exciting context to work in. So physical education. And I would say to you, of your £9,000, please consider carefully spending some of it on the professional development of your own colleagues. Please do not sign away the teaching of physical education to somebody who says they can take it off your hands. Because in 2 years' time, if that money is not there any longer, those people won't be either. And the teaching of physical education will have slipped back 2 years, not moved on. You have an opportunity here to really make a real difference to the teaching and learning through physical education in our schools. Please do not sell that out to people from the outside. Make sure you are looking at the professional development of your colleagues as a priority. And I know they'll need support, you'll need opportunity to have them mentored and all the other things. Build that into your investment and your thinking. If that is sound, then the rest will automatically come from it. If that is not sound, then it's only the kids that get great experiences outside school and are sporty and perhaps have sporty parents that will enjoy and endure and continue playing. We've got to lay a different foundation than we've ever done before. And this is a fantastic chance to do that. Don't let it slip away and don't give it away to other people. You are the best people to teach children. You are the best people to provide teaching and learning. This is just a different context, and your teachers can, and I know will, make a real difference with this subject. So if we've got PE sorted, what else are we doing? Well, you may, I hope, have heard of the school games. So we have lots of competition now, and we have school games organisers whose job it is to encourage all of you to think about engaging in competitive sport. And of course, that really appeals to a considerable number of youngsters. And I think it's really important for you at primary school to think about this as personal best, encouraging youngsters to compete, not just the first team, not just the best 7, but really looking at trying to widen competition and, most importantly, make sure it's inclusive of all young people, not only those who are very capable. And of course, this is also where clubs from outside your school can make a contribution, whether that's junior clubs or other clubs can certainly make a contribution, and your own clubs, your own friendship groups on your own primary site, encouraging youngsters to form friendship groups, and even thinking about them running their own clubs. You know, some of this is about helping them develop some skills way beyond the doing of sport, learning through sport as well as learning in it. But of course, this is also the place for coaches. And the reason you would pull coaches onto your school site is not to substitute for your teachers, but to complement and add value. So it's looking at stretching the most talented. Perhaps just as you would if youngsters were struggling with reading or maths, bringing people in to do some remedial work, some support work, to add and to help. So what you're thinking about coaches doing is adding real value to that basic teaching proposition that you've got. And here I make another plea to you. Because someone has a certificate which says on it, there are this or are that, please don't at face value think that means, first of all, that they know how to work with primary age youngsters, because most governing bodies at this time do not have a dedicated programme for working with young people. So the coach education they'll have been through is to work with adults. So check what these people are capable of, and just as you would with anybody else coming onto your school site, make sure you've inducted them properly. Make sure that they are teaching within the ethos of what you want, coaching as you would want them to, not simply just letting them on the school site because they have a certificate. And this is where the County Sports Partnership here in Leicestershire and across the country have a big part to play. One, in working with governing bodies to make sure the offer that's coming towards you from governing bodies is appropriate and child-friendly, but also making sure those coaches that are putting their hands up, and I'm sure you've already had 20 emails. I know I was in Leeds on Tuesday, and some of them had as many as 40 offers of taking this 9,000 away and providing people to come in and do it. No, this needs to be managed by you. This is your children, this is your educational outcomes, this is your school, and you need to make sure this is done at the right level and in the right way. And finally, this one. I've called this engagement, enjoyment and exercise. And exercise always spins up the notion of sort of standing in the yard doing these kinds of things, and that's not what I mean by that. I mean thinking about active travel to school. Thinking about you're going to use some of this money to create different zones in your playground so it's not dominated by the same youngsters with a ball every lunchtime. Are you going to think about how you're going to link this to your school meals, your advice on personal social development, all of the things that you're trying to do in school? There is a way to use some of this resource, I would suggest, to enhance some of that work that you're trying to do. And as much as I would be, and I am, a competitive sports person and very supportive of competition, I also know that that is a very small proportion of kids, by comparison, that want to compete. You know, when we did do the school sports survey for a number of years, it was probably no more, at the very best, 30%. And the other 70% were left disengaged. Well, do I need to tell you obesity figures? Probably not, but I guess I will. Coming into primary school now, at 5, 23% of our youngsters are fat or obese. And the worst stat is that by the time they leave you at 11, 33% are fat or obese. Now, I'm not asking you to solve obesity. You're asked to do everything. You know, you're meant to solve all the problems of the world. And I'm not suggesting that you alone can solve these things. You cannot. And particularly that, obesity is a most complex issue. It's to do with all sorts of things. But you can create a really healthy environment on your school. And can I just make another point about health? We think about health sometimes as a physical thing. But of course there is emotional well-being and emotional health. And a lot of your teachers are incredibly stressed. I've been in so many primary schools the last few months, and there's a lot of stress in there. And I tell you, if you captured physical activity, and I don't mean running down to the gym, I mean just going for a jolly good walk. If you captured physical activity and put it in a pill, everybody'd say it was a miracle cure. So encourage your own staff to be a bit more physically active. And I know that, you know, you're thinking, good heavens, this woman's completely lost the plot now. But I think that's really important. Try and encourage your own staff to be physically more active. And create an environment where activity is fun. It's enjoyable. It's for everybody. You know, the wake and shake type thing that goes on in the morning just before everybody comes to school. Just to get them focused. Really interesting, we did, for a number of years, we did playground development in primary schools called Zone Park. And what happened was the great long queues that happened after lunch breaks for head teachers when they were dealing with all the fights that had gone on in the yard reduced dramatically. But more importantly, concentration improved in the afternoon, which is often when you struggle most to get that focused learning. So doing this is about helping you do the job you're trying to do. It's not something to tag on and to worry about. And that picture is not a mistake. It's there on purpose to show that physical activity and what you eat, energy in and energy out, are really important. And it's helping youngsters understand that. And moving youngsters away from this notion that health and fitness is about being really thin. You know, and I know the research that's just come out that shows that primary age youngsters, both boys and girls, are now worried about their body image. We've got to try to help them understand that being healthy and well is all shapes and sizes. It's not about being just thin. I know obesity is an issue, but it's about being healthy and well. It's about being active, and it's about eating the right things. So is this an opportunity to put that higher up your agenda? That slide's not there for any other reason than to explain there's a lot of things out there that can help you. And for you, it'll be about accessing what works for you and what makes a difference to your young people and making sure it's quality. That's the word I would use. Make sure whatever you draw into your school is of the highest quality to complement what you're trying to do. The other government investment, just a few little things that I think probably worth just reflecting on. The government is going to continue investing in 16 to 19-year-olds in secondary schools as sports ambassadors. And one of the things I would say to you, if you haven't linked with your secondary school, think long and hard about whether you can build a relationship where those secondary youngsters might come and do some volunteering at lunchtime to organise lunchtime activity. There's a county in the southwest where all primary school netball is now umpired by 16 and 17-year-olds. They are a workforce that you are also helping to develop as the citizens of tomorrow. That one of the great things that's come out of the Sporting Ambassador movement is not sport, it's the growth of these youngsters as articulate, capable young people, able to manage, express themselves, advocate for PE and sport. They've been awesome. And so when you use those young people, you're doing peer-to-peer support. You're engaging youngsters in really exciting youngsters about physical education and sport. They're a terrific resource. Don't think about them as a challenge. Think of them as a resource. The other things that the government are going to do, one of them is that they are going to pilot specialist physical education teachers for primary. 120 places this September. And that will mean that those teachers, because they'll be positioned with teaching schools, will be out or already in the field, but they will be being developed as specialists. Do I think that means that down the road there's going to be a specialist PE teacher in every primary school? No, I don't. No, I don't. There's 18,000 primary schools, and if you go to Norfolk or any of the other rural areas, they're very tiny schools. But could you have a peripatetic teacher across a number of primary schools? Yes, you could. And is this an opportunity to pilot that with your colleagues in the cluster you work with or schools in your area? Could you begin to look at that as a concept? Someone who can deliver your professional development for your classroom teachers and then act as a mentor and support. There are all sorts of options for you here, and it's about you doing what you think is best for your pupils. The other two bits of funding, funding for coaching and volunteering is not coming through you, it's going through the county sports partnerships. There is additional funding for special needs, and that's going through the sports ability hubs, which are called the Project Ability Schools, and there's one here in Leicester where they have support for you and others around inclusion and special needs, and have done a terrific job making sure that the school games has a strong inclusion content. And then right at the end there, the work that I've described earlier for the county sports partnership, working really with the governing bodies to make sure the offer coming towards you is of the best in terms of it being appropriate for your young people and quality assured. So the question is, what now? What do you do now? My colleagues and I at the Youth Sport Trust felt that one of the challenges was we can say all that to you and you go away and think, crikey, where do I begin? So we've produced this, and this is a very simple audit sheet. There may be other things you want to use, but at least that's there for you if you need it. The other thing I'm just going to say is that, and forgive me if this is just a bit tongue-in-cheek, I'm sure you have a primary PE coordinator or a primary link teacher or somebody of that ilk. And one of the things I've said across the country, and people have sniggered as I've said it, but I think it's sort of true, is that please can I ask you that the PE coordinator is not the latest, youngest member of staff whose tracksuit still fits. Because I know that's the temptation, okay? Can we make sure that the PE coordinator, if it is that person, is really supported very well by you and the person leading on teaching and learning, so that we embed this subject much more at the heart of our school, so that in 2 years' time we really can see it's had an impact on school standards, not just more sport and PE, which is of value, but it's not as of much value as if it's really something that you've absolutely embedded and you can say, you know, next time I'm asked that question about Ring Fence 9000, I might actually put my hand up because I think I can use this. And that's probably why a couple of hands did go up, because people are already using it in that way. And finally, how are you going to work? Well, the Youth Sport Trust was the architect of school sport partnerships, and whatever you thought of them, or good or bad, they provided a cluster framework, a framework which provided peer support, peer engagement, secondary and primary lock-in. There were lots of good reasons why they were a good structural model. Now, it's up to you what you spend your money on now, but I would suggest to you that your individual spend is really important, But can you also think of ways of using some of that money to create a really good sort of cluster-based model, something that adds greater value than you could get individually? So I'll leave that hanging in the air for you to think about. And I'll finish with this, and that is that I hope you've worked out I'm quite passionate about physical education and school sport. I have been in this since I was a PE teacher, and I was trained as a physical education teacher. I taught in Moss Side, Manchester, which was an amazing experience. Probably learnt more from the children than they learnt from me. And I have grown all the way through my life with an absolute belief that this subject can change lives. And sometimes it can change the lives that you can't reach with other things. And I genuinely believe this is every child's right. Just as you as educators would believe it is every child's right to find that magic spark inside themselves, to pursue literacy and numeracy so that literate and numerate, that they can get on in life, that they can explore all they want to. You know, the one thing you walk about with for the whole of your life is this thing. It's called your body. And I believe it's every child's right to be given high quality physical education, to have a physical literacy, to feel healthy and well so that they can learn effectively. And if they are so talented, to pursue sport and achieve some of the wonderful things that we saw last summer in the Olympics and Paralympics. I believe that's every child's right. And I believe as educators, that's why you came into education. Because you want young people to get the best in life. And I believe this subject can help you do that. I hope you'll take this away and think about it, and that I wish you the very best of luck in spending this money, and I hope you'll spend it wisely. Thank you very much indeed.